Okay. So now people will say, well, what about the official story plane? What about that plane that, you know, allegedly left Dulles and turned around and came back and was out for an hour and 17 minutes and came back and crashed into the Pentagon, and why didn't they shoot it down, and what happened to the passengers and all of this? I call that the 937 official story plane, or for short, the 937 plane. Technically, it should have been called the 938 plane, but the government, for some reason, and people who put out the official story, round it down from 937 and 46 seconds to 937 instead of up to 938. So I call it the 937 plane. We're talking about the official live plane, Flight 77 allegedly. What about that plane? Well, the bottom line, because of everything I've already shown to you, whatever happened to that plane is irrelevant to what really happened at the Pentagon that matters. Completely irrelevant. However, I'm going to tell you what we know about that plane. The government's entire story about this 937 plane actually rests upon the alleged flight data recorder and the radar records. However, I'm about to prove to you that that flight data recorder that it claims it found inside the rubble of the Pentagon, just inside the alleged C-ring exit hole, 3 rings in a 5, that flight data recorder cannot be from not only Flight 77, it can't even be from an American Airlines airliner. And this is how we know. This is a photograph of the cockpit voice recorder. Now, the official story claims that the Pentagon and the FBI claim that the cockpit voice recorder and the flight data recorder, which are both in the tail of any plane, were found just inside the C-ring exit hole, very close to one another, as you'd expect if they wanted to put across their lie that they were close to each other to begin with in the tail. Wherever they were found, you expect to find them close together. So, this is a photograph of what they claim was the cockpit voice recorder of Flight 77, found just inside the C-ring exit hole, very close to the flight data recorder. Well, guess what? It's the wrong kind, according to American Airlines. The National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB report on the cockpit voice recorder states it was a magnetic tape model. Also, FBI Director Mueller said in a published article, I was interviewed by someone, that, quote, no information, no data could be retrieved from it. Well, if that really was it, you wouldn't expect to get any information from that. Now, what's interesting is for a flight data recorder, a black box, which is steel and titanium alloy that's supposed to withstand something like 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit to look like that, you've got to have far higher temperatures than anything close to burning jet fuel or office fires. So, he said no data could be retrieved from it. However, even though the NTSB report and the cockpit voice recorder said it was a magnetic tape model, American Airlines' own press release shortly after the attacks said that Flight 77, had it been Flight 77, that its cockpit voice recorder was the modern solid-state version, more resistant to damage than the older magnetic tape models. So, American Airlines is saying, in so many words, that the government's version of what happened with its own plane is a lie. And because the flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder are always together in the tail of any plane, therefore, the flight data recorder, the FBI and the Pentagon claims was found just inside the alleged C-ring exit hole, also has to be of the wrong kind. And they therefore can't be from from Flight 77 or any American Airlines Flight 757. Because the American Airlines also stated in their press release that all of their 757s flying had the new solid-state black boxes. Which is why the flight data recorder data on the alleged flight data recorder that they claim they found in the Pentagon, that they claim was from Flight 77, that they claim hit the building but didn't. This is why the flight data recorder data on the flight data recorder that could have identified whatever plane it was taken from that had to have crashed somewhere else, not the Pentagon, that could have identified whatever plane that is from, that could have identified what that plane is from, was positively, consciously zeroed out, according to Dennis Cimino, who is a professional flight data recorder data expert. And also why the data from the flight data recorder that they claim they found in the Pentagon was also downloaded 4 hours before it was found allegedly in the Pentagon wreckage, and that's according to the analysis by Aidan Monahan, and he has published that. There are only a few other minor problems, that's tongue-in-cheek, with an alleged flight data recorder allegedly found in the Pentagon. The FBI won't release the serial number for that flight data recorder, or the serial number from any of those millions of pieces of wreckage, any of which could positively identify the plane whose debris was at and near the heliport as whatever plane it was, Flight 77, or most importantly, not Flight 77. So you wonder why they're not releasing the serial numbers. It's pretty obvious. The FDR data also, as I mentioned, was downloaded 4 hours before the FDR black box itself was allegedly found in the Pentagon. The data that routinely identifies the plane and what airline it is from were zeroed out. I mentioned that. The flight data recorder data also shows that whatever plane that those black boxes were from left from the wrong gate, according to the official story at Dulles. The flight data recorder data that is extant in the data says that the cockpit door was never opened. I don't know how you can get a hijacker through an unopened, never opened cockpit door. The FDR data also shows, as I mentioned before, that the plane was way too high to even impact the roof. And that was according to Pilots for 9/11 Truth analysis. So now we're going to look at what happened to whatever plane it was that left Dulles. Now this is very important. The official story claims that Flight 77 took off from Dulles Airport at 8:20, and that it was an American Airlines civilian airliner with Barbara Olson and some 56 human beings on board. However, the Bureau of Transportation Statistics BTS database itself states, and it's still online, the official data states, that Flight 77 was not even scheduled to fly as an American Airlines scheduled flight on 9/11, and that it did not take off. And if it didn't fly, if it didn't take off and fly, it didn't hit the Pentagon. Now, I think any kindergartner can figure that out. The bank holding company that owned the plane that would have flown as Flight 77 and did earlier, but not on 9/11, I don't believe, because of the BTS statistics, didn't ever submit an insurance claim after the alleged crash at the Pentagon. No insurance claim submitted whatsoever. And I know that from personal interviews with the officer at the bank holding company in Portland, Oregon. There are also Dulles Airport security camera videos of the alleged hijackers going through security. They lead you to believe that with this video of the alleged 5 hijackers going through security, but the problem with that videotape is that there's no date and no timestamp on it. It's a security camera. They always, if it's a security camera, they always have date and timestamps, or they are useless as a security camera. And also, that video is 30 frames per second versus airport security camera videos are at 1 frame per second. What does this mean? We can very strongly infer that whoever put across the lie of 9/11 had those 5 alleged hijackers go through security, and they took, a regular video camera video of it and passed it off as a 9/11 video. A 757 did take off from Dulles, almost certainly, in my opinion. A large plane did take off from Dulles at 8:20. But if it was Flight 77, as we've seen from the BTS statistics database, it couldn't have been flying as a scheduled civilian flight. So it's possible it was Flight 77, the physical plane that normally on other days flew on regularly scheduled flights as 77. But if so, it could have well been participating in some kind of a private, public American Airlines military Pentagon exercise of some kind, similar to all of the other hijack scenario exercises being hijacked. And along those lines, I don't think it's a coincidence that many of the passengers on the manifest of Flight 77, what the government claims were Flight 77, whatever plane left Dulles at 8:20, were connected to the Pentagon and were DoD contractors working on remote control systems that could hijack hijackers. Now, I'm going to show you why the plane that left Dulles at 8:20 and the eastward flying plane that the government alleges, it's the same plane that turned around and came back. I'm going to show you why that cannot be true. There must be 2 different planes. The government claims that the plane that left Dulles Airport at 8:20 reached cruising altitude of almost 35,000 feet and remained at that altitude well beyond the turn to the south and heading back east. and that it was already heading east when it first began to descend from 35,000 feet. As the same physical plane, but Indianapolis Air Traffic Control both saw on its radar and officially reported in its report that the plane that had left Dulles began to descend far earlier than that, before the turn. And before its transponder went off and went down at least 6,000 feet before the transponder was turned off, and Indianapolis Air Traffic Control reported to the Aircraft Search and Rescue that the plane had probably crashed, certainly landed or probably crashed, and wanted search and rescue to go out and try to find it. But as the same physical plane cannot do both, the same physical plane cannot start a descent, according to one radar, on the westward track, and also still be at cruising altitude and not start the descent until 9:01 on the return eastbound path and still be the same plane. This is proof, according to myself and Robin Horden, who is a co-investigator in 9/11 with me, who was an air traffic controller at Boston Center for many years. We both believe that this is proof, amongst many other lines of proof, that they have to be two different planes. There was a plane swap. I'll go past this just for time. So even if Barbara Olson was on the plane that left Dulles Airport at 8:20, she couldn't have been on the eastward flying plane that allegedly crashed in the Pentagon in any case. Yet Ted Olson claimed that she called him twice from that plane, from the plane that was going east. We already know that he lied, because the FBI stated under oath that the alleged multiple, at least 2 if not 3, cell phone and or seatback phone calls that she allegedly made to him and that were connected to him on 9/11, that they never happened, that they lasted for 0 seconds. So in addition to being physically impossible to connect, it is also physically impossible to connect any cell phone call at that time at the cruising altitude of 35,000 feet. And American Airlines 757s did not have working seatback phones on 9/11. We have that from former American Airlines flight attendant Ginger Gaynor, who is a major 9/11 truth person, activist in San Diego 9/11 Truth. So, no wonder the FBI, the Pentagon, and American Airlines all now say that Barbara Olson's cell phone calls and or seatback phone calls never happened. Now, these non-existent alleged calls from Barbara Olson, who couldn't have been on the eastward flying plane in any case, as I've shown to you, are the provably false justification or rationale that the Bush-Cheney administration gave as the attacks were happening for why it believed that the official story plane was hijacked at all. And as Professor David Ray Griffin, the world dean of the 9/11 Truth Movement, has rightly stated in his books and public presentations, without Barbara Olson's alleged calls, in his opinion, there is 0 evidence that the Dulles plane, the westward flying plane, even returned east, and I've demonstrated for you that it couldn't have. Indeed, as we have seen, it was a different plane, and it did not. There was a swap. And as the plane that flew east, not back east, but a separate plane flew east, wasn't the one that left Dulles in the first place. Even if there were any hijackers on board the one that left Dulles, which there isn't any evidence they went through security at all on videotape, as I've shown to you, they weren't on the plane that was going east that the official lie says attacked the Pentagon at almost 9:38. Which explains why the Pentagon's own autopsy report states that that in that autopsy report there is no evidence of DNA that would match Arabs, when the alleged hijackers are claimed to have been Arabs. This is the Pentagon's own autopsy report. You can see that online. There were allegedly also 5 hijackers on Flight 77. So it's probably not a coincidence, wherever the DNA came from the alleged passengers on Flight 77, there were about 56 of them, as I recall, and that includes the hijackers. There is evidence from the DNA that was collected that they died somewhere. They didn't die at the Pentagon. I believe there was a plane crash or a plane explosion with a bomb someplace, and they did die. However, the official story is there were 5 hijackers on board. However, it's probably not a coincidence that the Pentagon and the FBI also claim that they found 5, the number of alleged hijackers, 5 unidentified remains that they insist they presume to be the hijackers, but can't prove it, which just happens to coincidentally be the same exact number 5 of DNA remains that they claim are unidentifiable. But they themselves officially say they presume those unidentifiable ones are not hijackers, which, just to be sure that no one could ever prove they were one and the same, and thus that there were no hijackers DNA amongst those found in the alleged plane, the government re-incinerated those questionable DNA samples and dumped them into a landfill. So what happened? What do we know happened to this Dulles plane? I call it the plane that left Dulles around 8:20. The evidence is it was swapped out for whatever plane went east, whether or not it was Flight 77. The bottom line is we don't know. What we do know from official records, and there's a graphic of it from the 9/11 Commission report itself. What we do know is that at 9:09 and 55 seconds, almost 9:10, FAA Indianapolis Center, the air traffic controllers there, reported the plane missing and probably crashed. Air Force Search and Rescue, as I mentioned. Also, Dale Watson of the FBI personally briefed the White House right after that. Quote, "We have a report of a large jet crashed in Kentucky near the Ohio line." So you can see right about here in Kentucky near the Ohio line, right about there, right after the alleged curve, right where the swap would have happened. According to a recent report, evidence given to House of Representatives member Alan Grayson by Glenn Greenwald. You recognize his name. He's the main individual who is putting out the Snowden documents, NSA Snowden documents. According to evidence given to Representative Alan Grayson by Glenn Greenwald, apparently from documents obtained from Snowden, state or claim that Flight 77 was flown to Nova Scotia after it disappeared right there. I do not know if that's true. But he should be interviewed, and his source and evidence should be made public. According to, about that. We also know that the Dulles plane, whatever happened to it, the plane that left Washington, D.C. Dulles Airport, is not the plane that flew east to Washington, another reason, which is why, coincidentally, just at the precise second, according to official records, that Indianapolis Civilian Air Traffic Control, FAA Air Traffic Control, reported the Dulles plane likely crashed and put out the search and rescue call to the Air Force, separate military air traffic controllers at that very second coincidentally first reported that they had allegedly just picked up the same plane flying east. And that eastward flying plane that the government wants you to believe was Flight 77, the same one that left Dulles, even if it was 77 that left Dulles, was never, ever positively identified as Flight 77 or even as a 757. The non-coincidence of this, the non-coincidence of the timing that I just mentioned to you, that the military had been tracking the eastward flying plane all along via a military transponder mode that only it and the FAA civilian air traffic controllers could see. And thus for the military, there was no alleged radar hole, making that eastward flying plane allegedly invisible, according to the government, for part of its flight, and therefore that they had lost it. The military never lost that plane. And besides, when there's an E-4B circling over Washington, D.C. that can see for hundreds of miles, they would have never lost that plane. Also, the 937 and 46 official story plane, alleged to have been Flight 77, almost certainly was a military plane, or at least a plane identifiable by the military as one of theirs, giving off a friendly, identify friend or foe IFF transponder signal. This would explain why it never triggered an interceptor response and was not shot down. It didn't need to be shot down. It was one of their own. Therefore, no stand-down order is needed to explain what happened up to and at the Pentagon concerning the official story 937 plane for two main reasons. It almost certainly wasn't a civilian airliner, and we've proven it couldn't be an American Airlines airliner anyway, and it didn't get through to hit the Pentagon in any case. There was only one plane destruction at the Pentagon. That was 5 minutes and 16 seconds earlier than 937 and 46 seconds. So whatever eastward flying plane it was, Flight 77 or otherwise, it approached the building at almost 9:38, was never positively identified even as a civilian 757, With its transponder off, Dulles Air Traffic Controller Daniel O'Brien has gone public, stating that she only had a blip and no positive ID whatsoever. The alleged positive ID, not as Flight 77, but even as a A757, not even as an American Airlines 757, was by C-130, that's a military transport plane, C-130 pilot Stephen O'Brien, who was sent to fly beyond the Pentagon and to try to physically see the incoming eastward flying plane. I have listened to the audio of his interaction with the tower, and all he says is from 2 miles away, he thinks it looks like a 757, and you can see from the radar records that are in the 9/11 Commission report itself that his C-130 was facing away from the Pentagon at the time that the alleged Flight 77 was heading towards it. He could not have seen an impact even if there was one, and on the tape he says that it looks like, when he turned around and went back towards the Pentagon and could see the building smoke cloud, he said it looks like it hit the building. There was never any positive ID of a 757 or of a plane impact by a 757 at the Pentagon by Stephen O'Brien. Stephen O'Brien was part of the in my very educated opinion, was part of a pre-planned output to the mainstream media and to the government, making the first claim for the official story at the Pentagon. And it is therefore not a coincidence that he and his very self-same C-130 were then sent to Shanksville. And he personally became the first alleged witness for the crash of Flight 93 at Shanksville, and we have absolute proof that it didn't happen because it started falling apart in the sky 8 miles before Shanksville. So he was a planted witness, pre-planted witness. So if the 937 official story plane wasn't Flight 77 or any American 757, as I've demonstrated for you from the evidence, what was it? I'm going to give you quickly the evidence it was a military plane. Actually a military plane. The first Fox News report was that it was an Air Force plane from Air Force sources. That's a military plane. All the Dulles air traffic controllers themselves, including Daniel O'Brien, whose responsibility was to track that very blip that was completely unidentified, had no data attached to it because the transponder was turned off. She said to ABC News, I've got that here, but I'm not going to play it. It's a clip. It's from that clip, quote, the speed, the maneuverability, the way he turned, all of us in the radar room, all of us experienced air traffic controllers thought that it was a military plane. I think that's because it was. The flight data recorder data of the alleged Flight 77 data recorder that was allegedly found inside the Pentagon, but it couldn't have been from Flight 77. The FDR data shows that the pilot of the Dulles plane validated his inertial reference system after takeoff. Commercial airliners never do that, but military planes do. That's from Pilots for 9/11 Truth. And if the eastward flying plane, alleged to be Flight 77, was known by the military to be one of their own, it would explain why, from the official record at 9:24 seconds to 9:25 seconds, when Dulles air traffic controllers first picked it up, Daniel O'Brien didn't consider it a threat. And also why at 9:30, when that blip, now alleged to be Flight 77, passed her airport, she still didn't consider it to be a threat, and neither did his supervisor at Dulles. And it was only suddenly seen to be a threat by the Dulles air traffic controllers at 9:32, according to their own records. But 9:32, I believe, is just rounded down from 9:32 and a half, which is the actual time of the real white plane destruction at the Pentagon. This huge billowing black smoke cloud, which you've seen at the right again, from the diesel generator trailer fire, I'm going to now prove to you that it began at 9:34 and 10 seconds, just before, this is amazing, just before this official story 937 plane, which was a real plane coming in towards DC, began that famous high-speed 230-degree descent. And we know the time of this from this very important, this is a freeze frame, a frame from the Doubletree Hotel security roof security camera, which captures, it's got a digital time, and if you saw the video, which you can see on the web at that link, that says 9:34 and 10 seconds. That's the frame in this video that lasts a minute or so, where this huge billowing smoke cloud starts up in the distance. And we know that's not the light smoke cloud over by the heliport, it's the big billowing smoke cloud. And that reads 9:34 and 10 seconds. So we know that whatever, you can start a fire in a diesel tank in many different ways, probably with a bomb underneath it, likely, that actually began at 9:32 and 10 seconds. So it, by definition, couldn't have been caused by an impact from the right wing or the right engine of Flight 77 at the alleged official story impact time of almost 9:38. Any kindergartner could figure that out. And as the generator smoke cloud began, this is amazing, I put this together, these two data points, as this diesel generator smoke cloud began just before the official story alleged Flight 77 plane began its spiral dive by a couple of seconds, I believe that smoke cloud may have actually been a signal for that plane to begin its descent. Because you can see that smoke cloud, it went up very quickly. You can tell that from the videotape, it went up very quickly. And as for that high-speed descent itself by the official story 937 plane, we have seen that experts, pilots, say that it is aerodynamically impossible for it to have survived going on the trajectory that it did, but we've already looked at that. So in summary, about the official story plane, Flight 77 didn't fly on 9/11, according to the Bureau of Transportation Statistics records at all, if it was flying as an American Airlines scheduled flight, which it did not. Whatever plane left Dulles heading west, even if it had been Flight 77, didn't turn back east, and was reported missing and possibly crashed while it was still flying west, just after it started to turn south. Whatever plane flew east was nowhere near the Pentagon when inside explosives went off almost 8 minutes at 9:30 by April Gallup's desk in Wedge 2 in the outside E-ring, almost 8 minutes before the alleged official story plane Flight 77 got anywhere close to the building. That this alleged Flight 77 was nowhere near the Pentagon when a large white plane exploded and or was crashed, destroyed at or near the heliport at 9:32 and 30 seconds. And even if the official story alleged Flight 77 937 plane had hit the Pentagon at the official story alleged impact point at column 14, which it did not, I've shown that, it couldn't have penetrated to just inside the third ring end and be the cause of the major destruction and fire that I have proven to you happened on the two innermost A and B rings beyond it. And the 937 FDR radar plane, the alleged Flight 77, could not have been, could not have been a commercial airliner in any case, and was almost certainly a military plane. At a very minimum, even if it was Flight 77, the plane that should have flown, that would have otherwise flown as Flight 77, flying in a military exercise in cooperation with the military, it was a known entity by the military and it didn't need to be shut down, which explains why the Dulles air traffic controllers didn't consider it a threat, even after it passed Dulles, and didn't consider that plane a threat until the white plane, just after the white plane had exploded near the heliport at 9:32 and 30 seconds. So to summarize the summary, not a single claim in the official story of the 9/11 Pentagon attack is true, not one. The real story at the Pentagon is the same as at the World Trade Center. Pre-placed inside the building explosives, some explosives outside, like at the 5 light poles and at the diesel generator trailer. Pre-placed inside and outside explosives with plane approaches and impacts as at the World Trade Center, or plane approaches and destructions as at the heliport at the Pentagon, merely as the pre-scripted and pre-planned cover clauses. And pre-planned explosives in the highest security military headquarters, the Pentagon, as well as at World Trade Center 7 in New York City, not hit by any plane that collapsed into its own footprint in near free fall gravity speed. In a classic controlled demolition on 9/11 at 5:20 p.m., which was effectively a federal building. It housed the offices of the Department of Defense, the CIA, the FBI, the Secret Service, the SEC, and New York Mayor Giuliani's Office of Emergency Management, OEM, is proof that no outside terrorist could have possibly actually executed the 9/11 attacks. It had to have been an inside job, which can mean only one thing. We have to stop calling 9/11 a terrorist attack. It was a massacre of our own citizens. and the real perpetrators are still at large and must be brought to justice. Thank you. Thank you so much for caring. Thank you so much for staying and for caring. And we can either take a break and then do Q's and A's, or we can go straight to Q's and A's. Can I poll the audience and see what you'd like to do? Let's taking a break? Going straight to Q's and A's. Okay. We got a real hardcore here. Okay, let's go here.
Yeah, so you theorized then that the white plane was a military plane, correct?
Likely. It was certainly a known entity by the military.
The only confusion I have on your presentation is if I am a pilot, not a commercial pilot, but a pilot. I understand ground effect and all that.
Right.
And the professional pilot saying they could not have possibly maneuvered that airplane if it were Flight 77.
That close to the ground.
The ground floor
Correct.
Of the Pentagon. Then how did somebody maneuver the white plane into the ground floor of the Pentagon? Well,
I'm not a pilot, but my answer would be that it was, first off, we know it was going much slower than the alleged official story speed, which was taken predominantly from the flight data recorder that I've proven couldn't have been from Flight 77 and wasn't found in the Pentagon anyway. It was going at a much slower speed, and it wasn't a 757. It wasn't quite as large, and it was probably a remote-controlled drone of some kind. And I've been told by pilots who claim that they know, experts, that you can more precisely maneuver via remote control, which surprises me, frankly, than you can by a pilot, because given the ground speed and the ground effect, that pilots tend to overcompensate one way or the other. That's the best answer I have for you.
Barbara, I don't think your theory says it went in the Pentagon.
Oh no, the white plane didn't go into the Pentagon, but he's correct that it came in extremely low. It was estimated by Alan Wallace, the Pentagon firefighter, that it was about 25 feet above the ground as it came in, hit its wing on the heliport and exploded. But it didn't come in level, remember. It came in like this, and that's one way that you can avoid the ground effect coming in at an angle. Question?
Over here.
You understand everything. This is great. A question? Yeah.
How many agencies do you think know now that the Pentagon was bombed as opposed to
The official story?
The official story.
Okay, I'll repeat the question because...
How do you keep a lid on that? I mean,
Right. Okay, I'll divide the question into two parts. I'll repeat the questions for the tape and other people to hear. Good. Yeah, let's get the questions on a mic in the future here. The question was how many agencies, federal agencies, I presume you mean, do I guesstimate or believe know that inside explosives and outside explosives, in the case of the Pentagon, were the real story and not the official story? Well, if the FBI, his official code name is Pent Bomb, I would expect that the highest levels of our entire federal government know the truth. And what was your second question?
how do you keep a lid on something this big with so many people apparently involved?
How do you keep a lid on something this big? The lid is off. I'm it. But to be fair, I think your question is why aren't there more whistleblowers? There are a lot of whistleblowers. Many of those whistleblowers have been killed. Barry Jenkins was the main whistleblower for World Trade Center 7. Somebody killed him just before the final report on World Trade Center 7 by NTSB came out, like what, day before, 3 days before, something like that. So he couldn't be a witness in a case countering it. Sybil Edmonds tried to tell the truth. They gagged her with a national security order. Philip Marshall recently got some critical inside information about training of the alleged pilots, the alleged hijack pilots at Marana Air Force Base, Army, not Air Force, at Army Base, Marana Airfield, which was also the airfield where many of the, at least $2 billion of the illegal arms to Iran were sent in the October surprise in Iran-Contra, and that's per Seymour Hersh, front page of the New York Times. And he was just murdered. His 2 children, and his dog were murdered in his living room. So, yeah, they keep the lid on.
Not Seymour Hersh.
No, Seymour Hersh. No, no, not Seymour Hersh was killed. Seymour Hersh is the author of the article on the front page of the New York Times that the same Marana airfield in Arizona where the illegal arms were sent to Iran in Iran-Contra in the October Surprise, the subject of my book, October Surprise, it's the same Army airfield in cooperation with the CIA where Philip Marshall's sources, who were former Iran-Contra drug and arms running pilots like he used to work with Barry Seal, who was also murdered, that Philip Marshall's sources were his former Iran-Contra arms and drug running pilots, and that they were still at Marana. And that's Cy Hersh's article. Yeah.
So I've been going to a lot of these. This is a very good presentation, very long, but very, very good and very informative. And I'm sorry that there aren't a lot of younger people here, who are inheriting this country.
Well, we have a videotape.
To hear this, my question is that there's certainly it's just like mind-boggling criminology going on, but
I couldn't hear that. I'm sorry.
This is like mind-boggling criminology going on.
Yeah.
But we're going back like almost 13 years, and now I'm looking at the criminology that has now been based on that continues to go on in our government.
Right.
The people, you watch Congress and all of this just destroying the country. And though I think it's good to remember 9/11, it's sort of like, why aren't we like bashing out there to do something about what's happening when we have like a Congress that gives themselves a 10% pay raise and doesn't give Social Security, even cost of living that cuts, Medicare, cuts Medicaid, cuts food. It's like, planned genocide.
Okay, I'm going to answer your question with these 3 slides. I'm going to answer your question directly with these 3 slides. And that is, why aren't we doing anything? We are doing a lot. I believe that 2014 could be the breakthrough year for 9/11 Truth for these reasons. These were actually the last 3 slides I decided to not include, but I will in answer to this question. Coming up, we've been told last year that the most important so-called 9/11-5 tribunal, military tribunal at Guantanamo with Khalid Sheikh Mohammed bin al-Shibah and the other 3 of the 9/11-5 is planned to go forward. Now, what I've proven to you, and David Ray Griffin and Richard Gage and everyone else has proven in the 9/11 Truth community, that the alleged hijackers, allegedly led by Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, could not have actually carried out the actual attacks. At the very most, they may have conspired to do something like the 9/11 attacks, but they did not execute them. So it's incumbent upon the 9/11 Truth movement to get this extremely important document, the 9/11 Toronto report, to the attorney for Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and bin al-Shibah. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed's attorney is, I think his name is David Niven out of Salt Lake City, Utah. I intend to, I've asked David Ray Griffin to get this and other documents to him, but I'm going to do that myself. And also, I don't know if you're aware of this, but just in the last 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks or so, mainstream media has reported that the 9/11 case against the Saudis by thousands of victims' family members and the insurance companies, presumably the ones that have already paid off Silverstein, that under the Bush-Cheney administration was squashed by Republican-controlled court judges, has just been reopened. And is going to be allowed to go forward. And in conjunction with that, there is a bipartisan bill in Congress, in the House of Representatives right now, that we really need to get behind with our representatives to declassify and release the infamous 28 pages of the original House-Senate Joint House Intelligence Committee 9/11 report that many of the people who have read it, say, point to the Saudis that Bush ordered kept secret, that be declassified and released to the public immediately. So we need to get behind their bill in Congress. That's number 1. Oh boy, here, I have to go to the slideshow, right? Okay. Last 2 slides to answer that question. All right, and also the president of we are doing a lot in the 9/11 Truth movement. The 9/11 Truth movement, in my opinion, in the past year has shifted. We are still focused on evidence, but we believe that we have enough evidence to go towards legal accountability. And almost 2 years, well, 2 years, 2 years ago, at the 10th anniversary, I was an expert witness on the Pentagon amongst maybe 15 or 16 experts, Richard Gage, Niels Harrit, Stephen Jones, not Stephen Jones, Kevin Ryan, many others. We gave our testimony, our expert testimony, to the 9/11 Toronto hearings, and this is the Toronto 9/11 report. One of the 4 judges, they called them panelists, for the 10th anniversary, most important conference called the Toronto 9/11 hearings. This is the report of the proceedings. Is the president of the Supreme Court of Italy. He used to be the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Italy. He's now the president of the Supreme Court of Italy. He still has an official position, Judge Impossimoto. And he has stated in the final chapter in this report, and also publicly since, and he is very serious about it, that he is willing to bring the truth, the facts and the data about what really happened on 9/11 into an international court. He originally thought the International Criminal Court, but that was tried and the court said, no, you don't have standing because the United States has not ratified the International Court Treaty. We haven't recognized its jurisdiction. One of his last acts of President Clinton was to, as president, propose the ratification of the treaty, and one of George W. Bush's first acts was to undo that act of outgoing President Clinton. So Judge Impossimoto is very serious of going before an international criminal court, and I think that would probably end up being the International Court of Justice. That's it, to answer that question. Yeah.
Did you run for
Could we have the microphone?
Let me get it. Barbara, while I'm getting the phone to him, I'm going to make a plug for our bookstore.
Oh, good.
And that is, everyone, if you do not know, we have a blowout sale at the bookstore. If you buy 3 items, they're all on blowout sale. They're very much for sale, and you get 2 items, you get a 3rd free. There's a lot of great information there. And don't forget Barbara's fabulous DVD. You'll learn so much more than you even heard tonight.
Yeah, and up on the screen here, if everybody could, if it comes up here. Everybody needs to write down this link that I'm about to bring up, because this is the link to the DVD. If you don't want to, I hope you do buy the DVD. It's important for you to have it. And it's intentionally not copyright protected. I want you to copy it and pass it out to everyone on the planet. But if you don't have the money to buy it, it's only $10, which is my cost. You will see the identical video at that YouTube, which has close to 80,000 views right now.
And
okay.
By the way, where is our sign-up list? I just need to get that back.
It's back on the table.
And I think someone should make an announcement about donations. Maybe at this point I could make it myself. But just everyone should know that I self-financed my trip here. I've paid for my own trip. So I don't know if there's a basket to be passed around, or you could give Fran any donation you'd like to make. Even $1 would be greatly appreciated. So I might be able to reimburse part of my airline ticket to come talk to you. So is there another question? Here. Oh, we need the mic. Oh, okay.
Thank you for your presentation and your dedication. Barbara Olson was on a passenger list.
Yeah.
How many other people were on that passenger list, and have the next of kin inquired into what happened to those other passengers? Is there any DNA evidence that those passengers perished? And,
yes.
Secondly, do we have a number of documents that have never been released about 9/11? In other words, has the government officially admitted that they are holding back
oh my God.
a number of documents, and how many would those be?
Right, well, okay, you might have to remind me of the second question, but the first one was, is there any evidence that who the government claims were passengers on Flight 77 actually died? Yes, there is. The manifest has approximately, as I recall, close to 56 individuals on it, maybe 58, including that it includes the alleged 5 hijackers, of which no Semitic DNA was found in their official autopsy, Pentagon autopsy. And so the families were given information about or DNA. They were given the choice of receiving DNA samples or burying body parts and that kind of thing. And there was an official ceremony, a burial ceremony. There's an official memorial at Arlington National Cemetery for the Pentagon plane victims, etc. That's all that I can tell you. The families have been led to believe that their loved ones genuinely died. And what was your, the other question is, how many documents do I guess? Oh my God. Well, we know that probably the most important documents are the plane parts, almost all of which, or many of which, would still have these serial numbers on them, any one of which could identify the specific physical plane that actually was destroyed at the Pentagon. And of course, they won't release any of those. And the most important plane part, of course, is the real flight data recorder, if there was one. So the most important documents is the physical evidence. And as we know, most of the physical evidence from the World Trade Center was sent off to China. And some of that steel from the World Trade Center, many people don't know, was melted down and made into the bow of the ship, the USS New York, a bow of a Navy ship.
This gentleman here.
Hi. Did you run for Leon Panetta's seat in the House at one time?
I did.
Yeah, I ran with you. We talked.
You did?
We talked afterwards.
I thought I recognized you. Yes, I should just say that I have run for Congress on, that was in 1994 with this gentleman. And what's your name?
Jack Michener.
This is Jack Michener. That was when Leon Panetta, who is, at that time, it was California House District 17. And when Leon Panetta, who had been our representative in Congress for many, many years, agreed to be then President Clinton's White House Chief of Staff, he had to vacate his seat. So there was a special congressional election in 1994, and I was one of 26 candidates who ran for that election. And with the votes after the fact, it was determined that I got more votes per dollar spent than any of the 26 candidates.
Congratulations.
Still wasn't enough to win.
My other question was, why, if there was this explosion in the Pentagon, thermite probably, powerful enough to blow up the second-story floor, why didn't it show up on the seismograph?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. I don't know. Good question. I'll look into it.
Here.
Maybe because it went upwards.
Hi, I'm part Kuwaiti, and this relates to Desert Storm because we built desalination plants and refineries and offshore rigs in Kuwait, and it was totally international. But after Desert Storm, the only way you can do business in Kuwait is through American corporations.
To this day. To this day.
Yes. Oh yes. And it's Kuwait got all the American franchises. Texaco has its main office, also main sister satellite station in Kuwait. So the bottom line is it's all about markets and market monopoly and market oligarchy.
Literally oligarchy.
Yes. Then what does China think of us, and how does China get into this picture? Because I feel China is a lot more subtle and more effective in their economics, while we are completely military based. So where do you see China in all of this? Why isn't China leading all of this?
Why isn't China leading 9/11 truth? Is that your question?
Yeah.
Good question. I don't know. I'm not an expert on China. I would like to point out that China was granted World Trade Organization status 3 days after 9/11. That may or may not be a coincidence. On the same day that the Saudis flew out before any American could fly.
I know.
Bizarre.
9/11 was an inside job, as I'm sure it was. What is the role of the Saudis? Were they just in cahoots? I mean, they were obvious independent terrorists.
Yeah. Okay, good question. I think I'll repeat that because it wasn't quite. If 9/11 was an inside job at base, the real plot, what is the role of the Saudis, of these alleged hijackers? Well, I'm going to give you my opinion. I believe that Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and company really did want to do the attacks, but they didn't do the attacks. So between those two is the question mark that the government needs to tell us. And I think we will learn a lot from these redacted 28 pages that hopefully will be made public pretty soon and become part of this huge case against the Saudis. That case, by the way, specifies Bandar Bush, who is now the head of Saudi intelligence, you know, and was our Saudi's representative to the United States or the United Nations, one of the two, before and after 9/11. I personally believe that the CIA and the FBI, I think that this at the various highest levels, this idea that the intelligence agencies and the FBI didn't communicate and didn't cooperate is a crock. I mean, at the very top, they were all in cahoots. They had to be to not only affect the inside attack, but also cover it up so successfully since. So in my opinion, they, just like the Reichstag fire, there was actually a real Dutch, I believe, communist, a kind of inept person like Hani Hanjour, who really intended and set some explosives in the Reichstag, like the capital of the United States, you know. But the Nazis, Hitler's Nazis, their intelligence knew exactly what it was going to do, just like at Pearl Harbor, protected the attack, ensured it was spectacular by adding their own explosives to make it totally, you know, and then blamed them after the fact, because that was the whole point. We wanted to blame the Muslims, the real inside perpetrators wanted to blame the Muslims, but apparently not the Saudis. They're still trying to, the Bush side is still trying to cover up the Saudis. And there's another power bloc in the United States and the West that is trying very, very hard to point the finger now at the Saudis. But that's only the limited hangout answer. And what's interesting to me is that if this case goes forward against the Saudis, and I think it will, that the Saudis' only real defense is to point the finger back at the CIA and the military.
All right, this gentleman.
Yeah, I'd like to thank you very, very much for your incredible work and research
Thank you.
on this. And I know you've intensified it on the Pentagon, but I wonder if you now have any idea, Flight 93,
right.
Where did those passengers go?
Well, I do have an idea. The question is, what do I believe the evidence shows happened at Flight 93? We know, and my source for this is the work of American Free Press, not too long after and it's published in American Free Press. It's a weekly newspaper in Washington, D.C. And I could get you those references, but you could get them more easily on American Free Press website. But the American Free Press's investigators found that there was an actual crash of a plane on a mountain, on a hill mountain, before Shanksville. And that it was actually a second crash investigation site, that the so-called Shanksville site was not a real crash. I mean, we know that. And also, whatever plane ended up crashing into the mountain, something happened on board that flight, at least 8 miles outside of Shanksville and the final crash site on the side of the mountain, that caused an engine, one of the two engines at a very minimum, and parts of the plane to start falling out 8 miles before. So it was, in my opinion, it was either shot down, and I believe it was, on Bush's order that was given to Cheney between 9/18 and 9/30, and they have both testified to that. And we know that Cheney passed on that shoot-down authorization order to the National Military Command Center, who in turn gave it to the fighter pilots. And we even have testimony that from the fighter pilot who says he shot it down. So it's most likely that that a missile went into it, and it took a little while with stuff falling out, debris falling out 8 miles before it hit the mountain. That is my best information.
Lady there.
I have two questions. Has anyone ever seen the Citgo gas station
video?
And was there any seismic proof of that crash at the Kentucky-Ohio border?
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, you might have to remind me of the second one. My memory isn't that great. So the first one, has anyone seen the Citgo videotape? Yeah, it's online. You can watch it. Now, the interesting thing about the Citgo videotape, if you get the one with the digital timestamp, you will see that, there's a smoke cloud. And that smoke cloud is timed the same as the smoke cloud that appears on the DoubleTree Hotel video. It's about 9:34. So it's before the official story says Flight 77 or whatever the eastward flying plane was anywhere close to the building. And what was your other?
Was there seismic evidence of a crash at the Kentucky-Ohio border?
I don't know. Good question. I could try to find out. The only official record that I have, and I can give you the link for it. It is the FAA official report to the government from Indianapolis Air Traffic Control. They say that it started its descent about 6,000 feet. And the time is given, I can't remember it exactly, but before the curve, just before and at the curve south. And that they reported it likely crashed to Air Force Search and Rescue. That's all I know.
I have a question. The Italian president of the Supreme Court, does he have a particular idea in mind or several ideas in mind for an international tribunal?
Well, he does. I'm not privy to them. I do know that in the 9/11 Toronto report, in his final chapter, he's one of the 4 judges called panelists. The 9/11 Toronto hearings, it was September, I think, 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th of 2011, 10th anniversary. In his chapter, he states that he wants to take it to the International Criminal Court, but that has been blocked since. So, I mean, he's very serious about legal accountability, and we just need to come up with the right venue. And he will be on board, I'm certain of it.
I think you read Terry Reid, I think, his book.
Yep, Compromised.
Yeah, they did the same thing to his book that they did to your book.
Yeah, that's right.
Another book with the almost same name. But in that book, he says that he flew, they were running drugs, or I guess they were running guns down there.
Guns down and drugs back.
Yeah, and that they had the thing set up so that there would be no radar record of any of the towers that were passing.
Right. The drug planes were able to come in without a regular air traffic control system having a radar record.
Could explain how the thing maybe went to Nova Scotia or something like that.
That's very possible. Mm-hmm. I should say, many people don't know this, but in late August of 1988, there was an incredible press conference at the National Press Club that was attended by at least 100 of the world's mainstream media, including press. And there were 2 speakers at that, 2 whistleblowers, Terry Reid and myself, on Iran-Contra.
Okay, I want to say this. I'm getting reports from my American friends in Europe that Americans are totally hated. The American dollar at most places is not accepted anymore. And that Bush apparently can get convicted if he does go to Europe.
Right, he could be arrested. Mm-hmm. That's right, yes. It's been some time, as I understand it. Bush went to Canada and had to hightail it out of a venue at a speech in Canada because he was afraid of being arrested. And I understand that there is maybe even an Interpol arrest warrant for him because of his high crimes of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars in Europe.
I have to commend you on your investigative reporting and putting all this together. If American Airlines says there was no Flight 77 that ever took off from Dulles, wouldn't that be kind of an easy way to kind of convince a lot of people? Unfortunately,
the airlines hasn't said that. It's the Bureau of Transportation Statistics that state that. And the holding company, by the way, American Airlines didn't own that plane, that physical plane. They leased them from the bank holding company, whose office that was in charge of that is in Portland, Oregon. And I've talked to the officer who said they never put in for the insurance for Flight 77's plane.
But FAA has a record of every single aircraft that takes off from every airport in the United States. Now, they can get a wrong flight number and say we're 77 when they really weren't.
Right.
But certainly family members of Olson and other people that were on the flight would know I took my wife to Dulles Airport and she boarded Flight 77 or did not.
Or she boarded a plane that was mocked up to look like Flight 77. One or the other.
I have no doubt that parties in our government that think nothing of destroying over 3,000 people in the Twin Towers would find these people very
expendable.
Yes.
Any way to get around the problems with the media publicizing your view and similar?
Any way to get around the media's blockage of 9/11 truth? Well, the fundamental answer is we never give up, because there will be a breakthrough. That's number one. Many people don't know that there have been breakthroughs through the mainstream media. So normally when we're asked that question, I think behind it is usually, how come this isn't like the Kennedy assassination? Or why isn't this amplified in the press, like the taking of the hostages for 444 days on Nightline? Sure, it should be. I think it's compared to that we're asking the question. But many people don't know that on the 5th anniversary, for instance, out of my own pocket, like everything, I put on a press conference at the National Press Club with myself and Bob Bowman and Jim Mars, who'd already published his book Inside Job, and Dave von Kleist, whose information in plain sight supports that the planes at the World Trade Center were certainly not civilian airliners, almost certainly military planes. And so we were all at a press conference there. And prior to that press conference, which was very well attended and reported in the Washington Post, the Washington Post's chief editor for New York, Michael Powell, interviewed David Ray Griffin and myself for an article that was their banner headline article on the 5th anniversary in the Washington Post called The Disbelievers. You should read it. So, and there's also been, immediately after, covering and right after the Valley Forge 9/11 conference, 9/11 Truth was on Nightline. So it's not that the 9/11, and it was rather serious coverage, actually. So 9/11, I think it might be important to answer your question. I just had a light bulb. I think that those of us in the movement should take all those together and make one DVD out of it and send it to other media. Yeah. Great idea. I like that idea.
Okay, well, let's just take a few more questions. I want to thank Jason Bosch, who's been videotaping this. He does Argus Fest. I urge you to get on his email list and see his programs. Wonderful films. 2 or is it 3 a week, Jason?
2 a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Well, can you broadcast something as long as this?
I don't know. I promoted this event.
You what?
I promoted this event. I don't know if people. I might be difficult.
Well, you can break it up into.
That's true.
Yes.
I hope you do broadcast it.
I promote these events, though.
Yeah, I hope you do broadcast it, because I do believe, after having given it, that this is a very strong presentation, and the questions and the Q's and A's are much stronger and the answers better than on the videotape. But you could do either.
Okay, and I want to thank Joseph Land, who was sitting there with the bright red necktie, and prepared these visual exhibits, which he does an extraordinary job of. And who's also been active in San Diego.
Oh, yeah.
In the same way, and has made breakthroughs and contacts with some very important people. So
I should say that David Ray Griffin, who I'm very close to, has told me that he thinks the 3 top 9/11 truth groups in the country are Boston, San Diego, and Colorado. Yeah. Another couple of questions, maybe? There are 2 back there.
Let's hear from a few people.
If you haven't asked a question already.
We've got 3 here, so let's, Wayne.
I just wonder if you've been threatened or if any weird things have happened to you or...
No, it's amazing. I'm protected by somebody. I was the senior military affairs journalist at the Naval Postgraduate School, which DOD has allowed it to say is the Defense Department's premier science, technology, and national security affairs graduate research university in the country. And for 15 years, as a full-fledged GS-12, almost 13, full-fledged permanent Navy employee for 11 of those years, contractor for the first 4. And throughout that time, from the moment 9/11 happened, I've been public, totally public. Radio, television, publishing, front page of the Rock Creek Free Press that goes to 50,000 subscribers and kiosks in Washington, D.C. I mean, just out there. And I've never had a problem. And interestingly, we've had Richard Gage of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth to Monterey, California. I'm the founder of Monterey, California 9/11 Truth in the central part of the coast of California. And we've had him twice over the last few years. And the last time he was there afterwards, like milling around in the lobby, somebody asked him the same question. And he said, you know, it's amazing, I've never had a problem. I hear about all these people having problems and this person being killed and this person losing their job and Stephen Jones being forced out and Kevin Ryan losing his professorial position. And he said, I've never had a problem. And I said, you know, Richard, I haven't either. So I would like to, in a church, contribute that to cooperating with the force. You know, if you are really on the right path and you do everything you can from your heart and your head to follow the truth, I think you are protected by the force.
Ethel?
I just wonder if there is a program where they give certificates for outstanding persons in this field. And if so, could we send in all of the votes that we could gather?
For? You mean for?
Nomination for the most outstanding editor.
You mean in the media?
Yeah.
In the media?
Yeah.
I suppose. I'm not sure I understand the question. Do you mean in the 9/11 Truth movement or in the mainstream media?
The mainstream media.
The mainstream media. It's not a bad idea. I should say that it was my proposal as a member of the organizing committee on the recent DC 9/11 conference that was the main worldwide conference for this just past anniversary in Washington, D.C., overlooking the Pentagon at the Pentagon Sheraton Hotel. It was my proposal as a member of the organizing committee as well as a speaker to give a Breakthrough to the Mainstream Media Award to Sherry Berenson for her outstanding coverage of 9/11 Truth at Colorado Channel 12 PBS. And that's a very, she was going to be here tonight, but she got a cold or something. So Sherry, thank you so much, and we'll get a copy of this videotape to you real soon.
Question here.
I also want to thank you for an amazing presentation. I would suggest that you contact Al Jazeera America.
Yeah.
They are putting out more good investigative news than any other media that I'm aware of.
Mm-hmm.
And they might be able to help you. They might actually even be interested in doing a program about you.
Right. Well, I've been asked to be on Russia Today. It didn't work out. I couldn't make it to the studio in Los Angeles. I was a couple of days before the 9/11 conference last September. I've been on my work is I've been on press TV television from Iran. I haven't done Al Jazeera yet, but what's really important, we have to break this through in the United States. I agree with you. All of the above. All of the above. Al Jazeera English language. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I have a brief comment about safety and that concerns the difference between eyewitnesses who are firsthand,
yeah,
who are about to testify.
Exactly. They're the ones in danger. Yeah. The mafia knocks them off and the government knocks them off, and sometimes the mafia knocks them off for the CIA.
Jason.
And then maybe that can be the last question.
We had Lance DeHaven Smith here not too long ago, and I'd be curious your thoughts about, I think one of the big blockages for getting people to look at the evidence or look at this is how people are ostracized or how you're labeled. Have you experienced, maybe probably not personally because you obviously, you're just speaking the truth, but in terms of friends or family or people you've spoken to, both professionally or just privately, the challenges of that, and what are your thoughts on that, that obstacle?
You mean how you break through to anybody about 9/11 truth, not just the media?
Yeah, but in regards to people's unwillingness to, you know, because when you step out, you take attacks professionally and even privately from friends. Oh, you're one of those people. You know what I mean? Like, do you have thoughts on that?
Oh, sure. I've got, 12 and a half years of experience with it. I mean, my own brother almost threw an ottoman across the room at me when I got half a sentence out about 9/11 truth in his own home. Now he's come around. We're in a spiritual battle as well as an informational battle, and you just have to keep your eyes on the prize, number one. I've succeeded in breaking through to everyone I've spoken to. They tried to fire me at the Naval Postgraduate School. They tried to fire me for the week that they said I wasn't doing my job just prior to the 5th anniversary National Press Club press conference that I put on. But I keep very good records, and by the end of that grievance proceeding, the supervisor who tried to fire me was removed from our office and I stayed. So, you just can't, first off, you can't be shy. You have to be diplomatic, you have to respect people's reticence, you have to sense where they're coming from and tailor your message and how you say it to where they are, like any teacher. And it's very important to do that, to kind of be a chameleon, to interact with them on their level, both spiritually and informationally and politically. But as far as Lance DeHaven Smith is concerned, I really honor his work on SCADs. Lance DeHaven Smith, by the way, I believe is there still one copy of this over there? Yeah, there's one copy for sale over there. I brought this. It's $20. You can get it on Amazon for a little bit more than that, but every single American should have this document. He was an expert witness at the 9/11 Toronto hearings. His chapter is in here as well as mine, David Ray Griffin's, Richard Gage. In my opinion, this is the most important document the 9/11 Truth Movement has ever produced. And the editor intentionally made the cover at a distance to look identical to the 9/11 Commission report, which David Ray Griffin has properly said is a 761-page lie, whatever the... And this is the 450 or so page truth. So you really need to own this document. The reason I mention it is Lance DeHaven Smith spoke at this 10th anniversary Toronto 9/11 hearings. And interestingly, it was on his research on all the SCADs that he put up on his PowerPoint slides. And I am proud to say that he had October Surprise, which I initiated, the whistleblowing and research and publication of, went all the way to a congressional hearing with full subpoena power and greater funding than the entire 9/11 Commission, that it was very high to the top of a SCAD that private citizens have been able to successfully expose. Thank you. Oh, please do write down the URL, the link at the top, because that you can get the precise same video that's in the DVD. I do hope you get the DVD and make lots of copies of it and give it out widely, but you can also let people know that they can see the identical video at that link.